Welcome to the Endurance Drive podcast. Our mission is to share the key principles that structure our approach to endurance training and coaching. I'm Katie.
And I'm Elena.
And Elena, we are back to having guests on the podcast. We had one guest with Jim last week, and now you and me are bringing on a repeat guest. I am so excited.
I can't wait to talk to Gina. I love her, and I really loved that episode last year. So we are getting some good follow-up content it's been maybe about a year, maybe a little bit more. So we have some content to fill in.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's also crazy to reflect on the fact that we've been at this for over a year now. I think we're verging on like the, 16-month mark of the podcast, maybe a little bit longer than that. And it's been super fun. And I think we've got a lot of really exciting upcoming episodes and insights coming up too, because so many people are getting into race season. So we'll probably talk a little bit about that in today's episode, but stay tuned for episodes that are all related to race prep, racing. I've got a bunch of athletes that are starting to kick off their race calendar in the next couple of weeks. And I'm sure that's probably what you're experiencing too.
Absolutely, yeah. It's spring. It's April already somehow. I don't know how. It's April 2025. It's spring. People are getting into racing, and that's exciting. So we'll have a lot of stuff to talk about on that as well.
Perfect. Well, I think with that, let's kick it off with a couple of coaching and training insights, just you and me, before we bring Gina onto the pod. I wanted to just share a couple of great comments that I've been getting from athletes who are absolutely crushing it in their training logs. And it's awesome because this stuff inspires me as an athlete, it inspires me as a coach, and it's something that I definitely just want to share with others. So with their permission, I've shared a couple of different comments here that I'm going to read out, and then maybe we can riff a little bit on those themes. So the first one has to do with sort of training and life and the idea of courage. And so one athlete wrote, long insight, but realizing a big motivation for doing this Ironman is getting to be courageous every day. In my new job, I'm having to do new things every day and pushing through discomfort of not knowing how things are going to go and knowing I may fuck it up and having a body of experiences and workouts where I didn't know how it was going to go. And either one, I did it, or two, I couldn't do it, but I learned something and it was okay, is actually translating into my work life. I'm being braver in tiny ways because I'm going out on Tuesday night doing 5 by 30-second hills, knowing it'll hurt and not knowing if I'll finish, but just being a tiny bit brave and doing it, which this just makes me so happy. And I think this goes back to the idea that, yes, we're training because we have races and goals, but we're also training because of life and because we want to be stronger in life and we want to build these resilience data points and show that we can do hard things. So I think that's why I think athletes are often more successful in careers and other things like that, because we just get these opportunities to try that out all the time. So kudos to this athlete. And I hope everyone, whenever they have a hard workout, is like, hey, I'm going to translate this into being more brave or being more strong or whatever that is in your life stuff too.
Yeah, I love this, and it kind of goes back to when we had done some series before, I think maybe about a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, when we were talking about some of the value of endurance sports in different facets of our lives. And, there's the community point, but there's also clearly this confidence, self-resilience kind of point. And that's something that I think about so often too. It's seriously like the muscle that we talked about, like how you strengthen the muscle in your brain of being able to go out and do hard things, of taking on something that has an unknown to it by doing these workouts or doing these events or whatnot. And I just think it's such an important part of why we do this in the first place. Like the why behind doing something silly like running, I don't know, 26 miles or multiple laps around a track or whatever. Like we can always joke that these things are so silly, and they kind of are, but they also serve a greater purpose. And I'm loving hearing athletes like actually think about that, reflect on that, and see that transition into the rest of their life.
Totally. And I do want to call out here that this athlete mentioned there are two outcomes, right? Whenever you do something that's scary, either you do it and you overcome it and you didn't think that you would, and that helps you. But I think it also helps you if you don't actually do the thing or you fail. Like you try really hard and you don't hit those splits or you have to bail on your workout. I do think that that also teaches you, like, even if the quote worst case scenario happens of you not panning out, you will actually be okay. And you will come back a couple days later and you will probably crush that workout. So I don't think that this lesson should be read as like, hey, you try something hard and then you always get it and everything's better, because sometimes you have a really shitty day and it just doesn't work out at all. But I don't know, for me at least, I think some of those days, while they suck at the moment, are actually even more helpful from like a learning and growth perspective.
Yeah, he has a really good call out. And I totally agree. And I also think this is something that ebbs and flows depending on what else is going on in your life. And I use that also as a data point sometimes where it's like, wow, my push muscle, my like push drive is just not there right now. What else is going on? Do I need to like take it a little bit easier because of this? Or this is something that I need to practice again because I'm out of practice with like the ways that I'm trying to get myself to keep going. I'm putting too much pressure on performing in this way, and I just need to like take the judgment off, which is also something that maybe I'll talk about my insights that I'm seeing a little bit as people are getting into harder workouts. So yeah, it's just like a tool. It's a tool that can help you reflect on yourself. It's a tool that can help you reflect on how you're approaching these workouts, etc. But yeah, I love that take on it.
Amazing. Okay, so then one other comment that came in a training log recently, we've talked a lot about body image on the podcast, and I think this is important to keep kind of bringing up because a lot of people, almost everybody that I've ever talked to in the athlete space, will struggle with this from time to time. So someone wrote, I continue to have very mixed feelings about how my body is looking because more workouts plus adequate fueling equals more muscle, but not necessarily less fat, so I can see more cellulite. But then I can swim at a really consistent pace and then go out and do a 9.5 mile run on trails and do strides at the end and be ready for a big group ride tomorrow. Regardless of how I feel about it, my body is stronger and healthier than I've ever been. So it's a weird juxtaposition between how I feel about my body and how my body actually feels. And I think this just nails so many things that we've talked about so many times where two things can be true. You can feel really, really strong, and you can also not feel completely happy with how your body looks. And I don't know that there's a good answer to think about this. I think whenever I struggle with this, I do just try to focus on like, hey, what is my body doing? How is it actually feeling in my workouts? And is that the thing that matters the most to me? Like, is my value that I want my body to look a certain way? Not anywhere near in comparison to like how I want it to feel, how I want it to perform, and how I want it to do. So maybe just when you catch yourself kind of getting in this trap of like, I'm focusing a lot on how things look, try to reframe as like, well, is this at odds with how I feel? And which one is more important to me from like a values perspective?
Yeah, chills from this because I love it. It really resonates. And yeah, we talked a lot about this on the body image episode, which was probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 episodes ago now. So that's where we kind of dive a little bit deeper on this. But transparently, this is something that I have been thinking about a lot in the last, I would say, 3 to 6 months. And this quote from this athlete is almost hitting it exactly on the head of like, I feel so much stronger. I'm feeling really good. I'm not totally happy with how my body looks. It's changed a bit. It feels a little bit different to me. And I have to, Katie, to your point, the way that I've had to handle that is by grounding in the values, like reminding myself of how it felt when I didn't feel good and thinking about how, well, would I rather be there? Absolutely not. Like, that was debilitating to not feel good. I would much rather feel good. So focusing on that, trusting the process and reminding myself that everything else will work out okay. I think we're just always being harder on ourselves than anyone else would be too. So catching that little critic in your mind, being able to reframe it on what's going on well, why you feel strong, etc., and then kind of moving forward from there. But no, it's not easy, and it's something that comes up a lot. So just validating this feeling as well.
Definitely. And we will probably come back to the idea of the inner critic with Gina. This is something we talk about with Gina a lot. So we can talk about that in our interview. But yeah, thank you so much to this athlete for sending this comment. And all of our athletes, keep up the awesome work in your training logs. It's just so awesome to see it as coaches.
Absolutely. Okay, little transition to some of my insights recently. First one is a bit tactical. I just want to talk a little bit about using down weeks. Down weeks are something that I like to use a lot as a coach. And then sometimes as an athlete, I find myself forgetting that I use them a lot as a coach. And I think they're really valuable. And I've had to remind myself of taking down weeks. And then also more recently talk about those signs with my athletes too, in case we move those around. And just want to like do a primer on what's the point of these, why are they helpful. Basically, down weeks for me are just, they're not necessarily doing nothing, but it's like a week where the pressure's a little bit off. I'm not doing a lot of intensity, but I'm bringing the mileage down for me running wise, or the volume down a little bit. It's not like a ton, but it's just a week where everything feels a little bit chiller. And if I have any hesitation of whether or not I should do a workout, I'm tired or whatnot, I'll take the rest day, as opposed to maybe having a harder conversation about that with myself on weeks where I'm trying to push a bit more. I think they're really, really helpful for a few reasons. The first is having a bit of a mental break or structure around training. So it helps me push harder in the weeks where I'm need to push harder because I know that I have a rest week coming. And that periodized approach has been helpful for me in terms of like the mental thinking of how I'm structuring my training. Additionally, I think there's generally something around adaptation to training. So when you give your body a little bit more rest, you could adapt to the hard work you've done in the previous weeks where you've been on a bit more and then take that into the next few weeks as well. Instead of always feeling like you're drained consistently throughout a build, I think it's helpful to have a little bit more recovery. And again, it doesn't have to be a whole week. It could be like a few days. And that's something that I've been thinking about with myself and with athletes as well. And then finally, I think they can be really helpful if you're planning out in advance of your training and you're really thinking about the structure to fit into your life things that are going on as well. So if you're going on a big vacation and you know you're not going to be wanting to train or able to train in the same volume way that you have been at home, they can be really helpful to have a down week that's planned there. So we're structuring harder training beforehand, getting that adaptation, enjoying the vacation, getting the mental break, etc., and coming right back into it. So a few reasons why these are all really helpful. I took one in like a bit of an unplanned way last week, and I decided it like basically the week of, and I'm really happy I made this decision because I had a few signs that I was paying attention to that helped me realize that I should take a down week. For me, it's typically a few nights in a row of bad sleep, like 2 to 3 nights where I'm just like sleeping horribly is typically a sign that I'm a bit overdoing it. And also get kind of like a deeper ache in my legs where my lungs feel totally fine, but I go out and do something and my legs just feel like they are completely fried. And it made sense because I was also layering on a lot more volume. So that made sense to me. And then finally, from a life perspective, I had some unplanned travel for work. So I was traveling a bit and then also hosting some friends, which is really fun. We were skiing a lot. So I was still going to be out doing that. For me, we've talked about it before. I love skiing. I didn't feel like I needed to like crush workouts around that as well. So for all those reasons, I took it was like ended up not being a full week, but like 4 full days of lower intensity stuff, easy runs. I wasn't hitting workouts. I moved all my workouts from that week to the next week. And I'm really glad I did that. I'm feeling so much better now. And I also think that's carrying through my training. So just think about the uses of down weeks if you're not already doing them. Be strategic with them. It's totally okay. It's very normal. I think they can actually really help you with your training.
I love this. Yeah, this is really, really good. And I think I do this a lot with athletes and the fact that I used to kind of program like, all right, 3 weeks of build, 1 week of recovery. And then it just seemed like people would usually run into stuff in life where they just had a down week that was maybe more unplanned. Maybe work was really, really busy. They weren't actually moving a lot. And then that turned into a down week. So I've moved away actually from programming like every fourth week has to be a recovery week. Instead, we sort of just take them when we need them. And if you're adapting really well and recovering really well, it's great. We can load it and then taper in time for your race. But I was going to ask you, Elena, do you think, for example, let's say you have a really high life stress week or a really busy week, should you still consider that a down week if you're not hitting your workouts? Or is it like all stress is stress? And, how do you think about that in the context of life just being crazy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I tend to fall a little bit more on the all stress is stress camp. And this is where maybe like that structured, it's a full down week or not approach is less helpful because really what you need to be doing there is thinking about it in terms of the days of how you're feeling and the actual signs that you're taking of like my sleep. Am I feeling good in my workouts? I'm not feeling good in my workouts. I need to take, a day off, see if I feel better, maybe 2 days off and see if I feel better. And that's like a more cascading approach as opposed to being like, here's a full week that's a down week. If there is a week though, where you're like, I have a lot of other stuff going on. I'm still gonna I'm taking care of my body. I'm gonna focus on taking care of my body and I'm gonna have a lower intensity week. I think that counts as a down week if you're ready to go hit your training the next week. But if you're still feeling drained, if that week is like, I'm not sleeping, I'm super stressed, I'm not feeling good, that's to me a stressful week. I wouldn't call that a down week. So I wouldn't jump right back into training and be like, oh, now I have to hit it even harder because I didn't hit it last week. To me, that'd be like a phased back in approach where we're going to take it a little bit harder, and see how you're feeling the entire way. And I'm doing that very much in tandem with an athlete on a daily approach. So yeah, I don't know. It's very challenging. It's like, it's maybe helpful to think about down weeks if you haven't done it and everything's good and you're just like, okay, I need a bit more of time to recoup. But if things are just stressful and life is crazy, I kind of take it day by day. And that's where you're listening to your signs of what's going on in your body.
Yeah, I love that. And I think just keep the open dialogue with your coach, right? Let your coach know what's going on in your life, in how you're feeling. Like if you've got that deep ache, or you're not sleeping well, that's all really, really relevant information for us as coaches. We're using it for ourselves as athletes. So definitely keep that communication line open.
Definitely. I would rather people be more over communicative than under communicative, is what I say.
Yeah, we'll tell you if you're over communicative. It rarely happens.
It's like almost never. Cool. Okay, so my other insight was I kind of hinted on this, but talking a little bit about nerves and specifically like workout nerves. As we're building, I'm talking to a lot of athletes who are just feeling like a little bit stressed about hitting their workout. And I've even felt that before. Like my husband is training for a marathon and he'll even say like, I'm so nervous before this workout. And I don't think nerves are necessarily a bad thing. They make a lot of sense. They get some adrenaline going. Sometimes it can be scary to just be like, wow, I have this big thing on my agenda and I just know I have to hit it. However, I also want to kind of dive a little deeper in with athletes on why those nerves are happening and make sure specifically I kind of dig into, are they coming from a place of judgment of how you should be performing? Are you comparing to either other people or your previous versions of yourself? I often find it is previous versions of yourself. And that kind of persistent nerves, that kind of persistent comparison or judgment will, I think, in the long run, get in the way of you enjoying the training. So that's something that, like, more psychologically, I'm trying to tease apart with people when they're experiencing workout nerves. And this happens to me too. Like, I compare to past versions of myself. I feel nervous about a workout that's coming up. And it's good to like have that to get myself excited and get myself pumped up in some ways for it. But also, if I'm doing that too much, then I will get stressed and I'm getting upset about training. And then I procrastinate and maybe it gets in the way of me even hitting that workout because it just wasn't something that I felt very excited or positive about to begin with. So nerves are really challenging and definitely something that come up a lot in the training journey no matter what, but try to think about the judgment. And if you're having any judgment around your workouts, as in, I need to show up and if I don't hit the certain pace, I'm a failure. I'm going to try to hit this certain pace. That I think is really damaging. And my reframe for that is just practice showing up in general. Like take it in parts, do the warm up, see how you feel. You only have to hit one of them, do the one thing, and don't judge how it's going. You should already be proud of yourself for showing up and getting there, and everything else will just unfold. I think if you have judgment from the beginning, that will be kind of a recipe for disaster in long term if you're constantly trying to judge yourself against some kind of external standard.
Yeah, I love this. And I relate to this a lot more actually as an athlete than a coach because I get really, really nervous about big or new workouts. And I've sort of been focusing on a little bit more run speed training in the last couple months. And I work with a run coach. And I think a lot of times I've seen a workout come up later in the week and I'll put a little comment in my log like, hey, like I'm a little bit nervous about this one. And that actually helps me because then often we can have a little bit of a conversation that's like, okay, well, where is this coming from? What's scary about it? Is it the splits? Is it the time? Is it the distance? Whatever that is. And just having that conversation often can take some of the pressure off because I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to be okay because we've talked about it and we know that I'm nervous. And even if I just show up, that will be a really big win. And sometimes I think it can even be helpful to have a conversation about, like, hey, what if I do go out and I feel really, really bad and this just isn't happening? Like, what could we do? What's the roll down of options? We've talked about before. Sometimes it's not the day to go do your big workout, but you could do a modified workout or you could do an easy run with strides. Or there's not just like you're going to do it or you're not going to move at all. So having a conversation about what it could look like if it's not that A workout on the day sometimes takes the pressure off. And honestly, I don't think I ever even take that out usually. It's just having it that makes me feel so much more safe to know that, like, well, I could roll down and do something different if this doesn't pan out. And then at least for me personally, I'm usually totally fine to actually do the workout knowing that there is an alternative option.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's smart. Just like having the plan in your head that you're not feeling like, it's this or bust. I think that's where people kind of have that black or white approach that can get really challenging mentally if things aren't feeling good. So I love that roll down approach.
Yeah, we could probably have a whole episode on how like most anxiety comes from uncertainty. And so if there's uncertainty about like what's going to happen in the workout and you haven't done it before, that's so normal. But yeah, talk to your coach about the whole theme of this insights is like just talk to your coach and it'll be great.
Yeah, maybe it's sneaky marketing. Coaching is valuable. Talk to us.
Yep, exactly. Email us at theendurancedrive.com. All right. Well, I think it's just about time for us to switch into our interview. We're super excited to have Gina on the podcast today. Gina is one of my athletes who I've coached for several years now, but she is also a coach herself. So she works with a lot of people kind of on goals and leadership, which is super cool. She has great advice on thinking about career, thinking about achievement, thinking about your inner critic, which we've talked about. And she's also a really inspiring athlete. So we had her on about a year ago. We'll link that episode in the show notes if you didn't catch it, but this is sort of the follow-up episode. And yeah, I mean, I think Elena, you and I have probably learned more from her over the years than I have taught her in coaching, which is something really, really valuable about a lot of these relationships. So we're excited to share that with everybody. Okay, Gina, welcome to the podcast. We are so excited to be bringing you back on.
I am so psyched to be here. To get to be on my favorite podcast twice is such a treat. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, I think that we will kick it off right away by just asking about what's new in your life. You've got some pretty exciting updates that I think will lead into a lot of really helpful insights. So just let us know what's going on.
Well, the big news is I started my own business. So I achieved and have gone for a really big dream of mine, which is to run my own thing. And that business is Gina Cognet Coaching and Advisory. And so I am doing three things. I am a leadership executive coach for individuals and teams. I do organizational development, or another way I like to call it is team effectiveness consulting for companies and teams and individuals. And then the third piece, which I haven't done yet, but I'm excited to explore, is to be a fractional leader of a company part-time. And I'm excited to tell you about it. Yeah, it's been a great ride so far.
Yeah, that's so exciting. Congratulations. I've heard a little bit about this as your coach, and I'm sort of in that corner, which has been really, really cool to hear about, but we're really excited to share that with everyone. Can you talk a little bit about, I think this applies to anyone who's thinking about taking a risk, doing something uncertain, doing something new. How are you thinking about that? And how do you manage it when you have this big goal that you've been thinking about for a long time, but it's a big risk to take it? Talk us through kind of that managing uncertainty piece.
Yep. So I think the biggest catalyst to my taking this risk and making this step now was my husband, who I was considering. I was very far along in a job search for a cool job at a organization I love. I wound up being the runner up for that job, but before I found that out, my husband said to me, even if you get this job, I think that you would be best served by going out on your own. I can see that this is something you really want to do. I know you can do it. I believe in you that you can do it. And I'm prepared for the uncertainty that will come with it for our family. And so just, like super love letter to Archer for supporting and believing in me to do this. And that gave me the confidence I needed to say the worst case scenario is I try this and it doesn't work out. And that, I go back into the job market. I think the fact that the job market is a really unusual job market right now also makes it feel like, well, I don't have much to lose. I'm sure, I know if I wanted to go and get a great job, I'm sure I could right now. But at the same time, it's exciting. And there were a lot of catalysts and things I thought about last summer as I've talked with you, Katie, about this. I had the race of my life at the Nantucket Triathlon, which is a triathlon I do mostly not just for fun. I mean, for me, the sprint triathlon is a great length, and I do it as part of a family effort. I think it's the first time I've ever been on a podium. I was third in my age group, which was exciting to have that happen at age 52 or 51 at the time. But a man died during that race who was about 10 years older than me. He drowned after having a heart attack. And to have had this high, and then to see somebody else have this really horrible experience made me just think, when somebody dies, and I find it often makes me reflect really deeply on my own life and to think about what am I prioritizing? How am I living my life? How am I making sure that the things that I value most are showing up in the most important way? So that started some thinking. In August, I went on this wonderful running and writing retreat with Katie Arnold, who's a terrific ultra runner and also writer. Just there, I was surrounded by a group of women right around my age, felt a lot of insights and just more time to reflect on who I am and how I have two parts of me and how I wanted to be sure that both of those parts could be alive and well. I wrote about it on my Substack. And so, one thing led to another. And I think what I'm doing now is I'm in my right place for me. I am building and creating a life and a career that allows me to be present as the wife and mother that I want to be, and to be present doing work that I feel like creates so much impact and gives me this strong sense of purpose and allows me to support my family in a great way.
Wow. I love all of that, and specifically how you speak about the intention that you had coming in to making this decision. And we talked a little bit, and Katie just asked about the risk that you were debating going into that, but I'm curious to hear from you now that you're in it. How has that felt? How has that intention played out? Are you experiencing that in its fullness, or are you still building that?
Yeah, great question. So, one of the ways I helped myself fully commit is I have a business coach. Her name's Johanna. She's wonderful. I started working with her in January. And one of the things we talk about is that entrepreneurship and owning your own thing is even more of a roller coaster, as I'm sure both of you can relate to, than when you're working maybe for an organization. And what I mean by that is the highs are really high. I had a great high this week. I signed a really big contract with an exciting client. So excited about it. There have also been days where I wake up and think, holy, you know what? I am trying to do this thing. And, hopefully this, and this is going to come through today. And it's scary. And I try to remind myself in those situations, okay, this is one moment, be present. Don't worry about the future or ruminate on the past, but try to be as present as possible and think, what are the small actions I can take now that help me feel like I have agency, that I have control? And I just start working on my business in small ways. It might be who's someone I wanted to reach out to today to tell them more about what I'm doing, or what's something I can do to shore up part of starting a business I actually find it really fun because I'm learning is you have to be your own bookkeeper. You have to start doing all the things. I have to have a communication strategy. So you get to do all of the things. And if you turn toward that with some curiosity, I think it helps quiet the fear. It is more fear of what happens what happens if you don't hit your revenue goal for this year, or what happens if you think you're going to do a great job on a project and then you don't perform as well. And so there's a little Ursula critic voice in there, I think, but I remind myself, think about all the things I've done before and I've overcome. And the other trick that really works for me is to do worst case scenario thinking. So what's the worst case scenario? Well, if I do a project and I do the absolute worst job, will have to deal with the consequences of it, but I'm not there and I shouldn't assume I'm going to be there. I need to focus on, again, it's like focus on now, focus on what I can do, focus on the present. And sometimes also it's reaching out to people who remind you of your strengths. I think that's a really important trick. Sometimes that's you, Katie. Sometimes that's my husband. I have incredible friends and mentors from previous roles, from just life. They reinforce to me that I can do what I'm doing and they're so proud of me. And that's been great.
Yeah, awesome. Like having the support system, especially when you're in an organization, you kind of have that built in a bit more. But when you're on your own, you need to build that for yourself, which is so cool that you have intentionally done that through the years and they can just back you immediately. One other thing that I was thinking as you were explaining all of this is that in such a big transition, there are obviously going to be things that are great that you're leaning into that are new and exciting, and there's other things that are, this is hard because it's a challenge, and you kind of got a little bit at that. But if you had to just say a little bit of like some of the pros of what you're doing now versus the cons of what you're doing, how do you think about that now?
So I talk about this a lot with some of my coaching clients. We all have these strengths that we take for granted. There are things that we do that come very easily to us. Because they come so easily, we often almost dismiss that as a part of us that is really strong. So, one of my strengths that I sometimes have dismissed in the past, but don't anymore, is connecting with and networking with people, like creating social capital, social connection. And when you're starting your own business and trying to tell people about what you're doing, you have to do this all the time. Thankfully, I love doing this. And so I do it a lot. And it's been a really fun part that I get to lean into this part of me and, leveraging a strength. I yesterday met with one of my coaching clients at Tuck, and another strength, he reflected back to me. He said, I love working with you as a coach because you're such a great listener and you can go with me in different ways, wherever he took me. So again, I'm allowed to lean into these strengths of being able to listen, empathize, and ask good questions. So those are things that I love. The other piece, Elena, is I love learning new things, and entrepreneurship every day asks me to learn new things, how to use Wave, the bookkeeping app, how to do anything. How to use Claude, the AI, to help your things go better. Things I don't like doing as much. Let's see, I can tell you there was one that was on my list every day this week until yesterday. I like to take notes after I do sessions or things, and then taking those notes. And I take handwritten notes because for me, that helps it stick in my brain. And then I like to take those notes and I either share them back to my clients, or I need to type it into a doc to do some analysis. And that process, if I don't do it right after I meet with somebody, it just gets pushed and pushed and pushed because it's not so exciting. It's also sometimes for me, I'm learning to appreciate how important it is to be really in my business and in the budget and into the money part. Scarcity triggers my fear instinct. And so being aware and understanding it helps me know where I need to go. And so that's something I've had a little trick I do now is I reward myself when I do my money hour on Mondays. I either go to a coffee shop or I make myself a really good coffee or something and put on a good playlist, and that helps me do it. So it's finding tricks to make some of those things a little bit easier. And then the last thing I would say is eventually, I think for things that are things I don't like to do, when I feel, like I have a smoother revenue line, I will probably outsource those things and be willing to pay somebody to do them so I can maximize my strengths and my time on the things that I do best.
Absolutely. And can I ask, I think related to this, I'd love to return to something that we talked about when we first had you on the podcast. You had an amazing one-liner, which is that balance is bullshit. This is probably totally different for you in terms of how you're balancing different things when you're in charge of everything that you do and everything that you take on. So how are you prioritizing different things? And you've talked about these different parts of you that are really important. I mean, you're a mom, you have, kids that are in high school, you have a lot going on. So how are you thinking about balance and what are you prioritizing kind of as you're starting your own thing?
Yeah, it does feel different now than it did before. I feel a couple of things. The life lesson I've been learning for a long, long time, as Brene Brown says, one of them is to hold boundaries for myself on certain things. And now that I am reporting to myself, I am the person I have to prove that I'm doing enough to is myself instead of trying to prove to someone else, a CEO, a boss. And so I get to decide, and that helps me I've put better boundaries on my work hours. I still work really hard, but I do it on more of my own terms. And I'm more around and I've spent more time with my children, which feels really, really good. My girls are in high school. They're fantastic young women. And I'm also able, like, I cook dinner more because my husband's out of the house more. So I'm just doing more things in my home. The other thing is in my previous employer, which I had a phenomenal experience, but I spent a lot of time traveling for that job. And there were aspects of that were amazing. I got to be around a really dynamic group of people that I love to be around. Like, and if I think about, I have a persona, I think of like Gina Clark is, my pre-married person is really like the career part of me, or Super G as I called her. She loved going to California, and she would go trail running with her colleagues, and she was around lots of energy. I'm a definite extrovert, but balanced Gina does better being here more. I've immersed myself more in my community. I joined the school board, and that feels really, really good. So it's a different definition of balance. I don't get it right all the time. My husband and I had a little bit of I will call it a discussion today about who was dealing with something with our kids, and it was whose turn was it? And, that happens too. So it's still hard, but it's better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The ebb and flow of how things change over time. And I guess, like, kind of related to balance or prioritization, a big part of what you do is talking about goal setting from the design your life perspective, also for yourself and your own business. So I'm really curious to talk about setting goals in general, how you think about this from your own leadership framework, but also how you translate that into the work that you're now doing, where you have to set your own goals and really hold yourself accountable to those.
I have noticed something that is true for me and is often true for very high achieving individuals who I feel like I interact with either in our athletic endurance drive space, also in my coaching space, is we all want to do all the things and do all of them really well at the same time. And what I have found is helping me with setting goals is getting much more focused and targeted when I set goals on, maybe I find there is a book called The One Thing, which is focus on one thing and do it. That's really hard for me. I can't do one thing, but maybe it's, okay, I'm going to focus on, I have a big revenue goal for my company this year. And then I have an athletic goal that I'm sure we'll talk about later that I'm focused on. And then, those are two where I'm really driving and striving towards. And so what I'd say is I coached someone this week and we were talking about goals. Her goals were, she had really high aspirational goals in multiple places. And we talked about, when you're trying to clean your house, sometimes you can't clean 100% of the house and keep it that way all the time. So maybe there's some rooms that you're okay keeping at 60 to 75% clean, but others that you want to have at that super high level. You have to be able to prioritize. And so in a coaching situation, or for myself, it's like, what really truly matters? What is of the essence or the bottom line that for me is really going to move the needle or make a difference? And I'm going to focus my energies there and allow those other things with intention to be less focused on.
And can I ask, when you have those goals, you've charted out, okay, here's one or two that I'm really going to focus on. Here's a career one. Here's an athletic one. What are the steps that you're advising people to take to kind of move towards those goals, depending on what the domain is and what it looks like in their life?
So something I'm trying myself, and I would actually invite us, this is my challenge of the week for folks, is to sit down, write down your goals. So, and you can have more goals for you. If you want to think about it over a year, a lot of us like to think about the year. You might have like 10 goals over the course of a year that you want to achieve across work, across family, your sport, other things, volunteerism, spiritualism, whatever. But then you might think about, okay, well, these two I'm focusing on for these 2 quarters, or I'm in in the third quarter, that's when I'm really going forward on another one. But thinking about it more with that kind of timeline. And then once you have that, it's thinking about, okay, say for me right now, I have a big revenue goal that's going to be for my business. So every day I write down 3 daily goals. This is my challenge. Sit down. The first thing you do is, what are the 3 things you need to accomplish that day that help you get closer to your goals? And that helps you focus. And then say them. Really super mind trick is say them out loud. If you have to say it in the shower because you don't want someone to hear you, but say to yourself, I'm going to do this, this, and this. That act of hearing yourself say something out loud is super powerful. And you're not going to get them done all the days, but having and setting intention for those goals helps you get there faster.
Yeah, I really love that. It's like what we've talked about before of process goals versus outcome goals and making sure that you have the process clear in your mind so that you can make your way towards the outcome goal. And also there's something there, like I love the speaking it out loud point because I haven't spoken out loud. I need to try that. But the manifestation point of like writing it down and putting it somewhere where you see it or like making it come into the world, I think there's really something to that. So I love that. I'm kind of curious for yourself then. Maybe we're talking a little bit about the athletic goals, but what are your big goals right now? You talk about this revenue goal for your business. What are your other ones and how are you balancing those appropriately?
So I have my revenue goal, which is really big. I have a personal goal around it's continues to be is to prioritize making time for meditation. And something I think James Clear from Atomic Habits, his philosophy, which is I think pulls together a lot of philosophies, is it's better to do something for 2 minutes every day than it is to do it for 20 minutes once a month. And in designing your life, we talk about set a low bar and clear it because that success helps you build on success. If I like, I can think about Katie, when Katie introduced me to interval training, I didn't start doing 10 intervals up hills, crazy thing. We start maybe with 3 or 4, and then they build over time. And so giving yourself the grace and the space to say, I'm going to do this goal of mine or a piece of my goal a little bit with intention every day really helps. Another James Clear mind trick that I think really helps is to think, he talks about it in the perspective of, so I'm not a smoker, I've never been a smoker, but I'm going to use this example. He talks about it that if you want to stop smoking, instead of stating your goal as, I'm quitting smoking, you start seeing yourself as, I am a non smoker. And so when you see yourself as the thing you're trying to be, you're suddenly going to start making decisions in a way that is, I'm already that person I want to be. And so what would she do? And I think that's a really cool trick also to help you get closer to achieving your goals.
And let's talk about that a little bit in the context of your specific athletic goals this year. I think you've got some big goals that we've talked about. Are you comfortable in be sharing what you're angling towards? And you're probably seeing yourself as that athlete.
Yeah. So I think what race is going to be my A race is still a tiny bit up for debate, but like this is me not doing what I said to do before, which is I want 2 races to be my A races. I'm training for covered bridges again. And so that is right now the A race for the year. And A race in the sense that I would like to really achieve a time goal for that. And in my head, Katie, I don't know if Katie knows. In my head, it's to beat, me from 10 years ago, which is 152, which will take me, that's going to be really hard. But my like A minus goal is 155, which would be the best.
And it's a half marathon, right? Yeah. So half marathon road race.
Marathon. Sorry. Yeah. Covered Bridges half marathon. I also want to hit the podium again at the triathlon. And so that is, I didn't expect to last year. And now that I did last year, I'm like, well, I want to do that again. That felt really good. Then I'm doing 2 other races. One, I'm really excited with Katie. It's as Katie likes to say, it's your 2 sports. So unlike most triathletes, I love swimming. So we're going to do a swim run together in August. And that's really purely the goal there is adventure and also to do something with someone who I love. And I'm doing the trail race that I really enjoy again. That is called the Vermont Overland, which is now in late August, mostly for joy. That's just for joy. I love to be out in the trails.
That's awesome. And all of those sound very exciting. A lot of fun times in Vermont. I've heard great things about covered bridges, actually. I've never done it, so that sounds incredible. Kind of curious too, because I know from Katie, and Katie can probably speak more to this, but you are crushing training, and this has been a journey over several years, and like the goal that you have is to break your time from 10 years ago, which is such a cool thing. I'm really curious to hear a little bit from you on how training has felt, how it's maybe changed over time, and maybe a little bit of how Katie, and maybe we can get you in this in a second, of like how you guys collaborate to get these breakthroughs that Gina, you're just compounding over years of training.
So I think what Katie's helped me, like, I love speed work and I never used to do it. And I don't think I thought I should or could. I always would run mostly just to get out there and get, time on task and figured that the more I ran, I would improve my speed, but you only get so much faster. And Katie and I do a lot of intervals now and I love it. It's so fun. It makes your runs go faster. It feels really good to just like push yourself to that, to that growth edge. Today I did a 20-minute zone 2 and then 15 rounds of 1 minute on at threshold, 1 minute off, and then cool down in zone 2. And you feel so alive after that. And I'm seeing I'm getting faster, right, Katie?
Yes, you are definitely getting faster. Yeah, and I mean, I think what's really cool about your progression as an athlete over time, Gina, and this is for many athletes who've been doing this for a long time, is you put the time in of doing that base work, right? When you start out, you really need to build your aerobic base. And if someone's brand new to the sport, they don't have an aerobic base. So I'm not going to say, okay, we're going right into 15 by one on, one off. We're going to start with a lot of zone two. But you did that for years. And it's nice because then you really earn access to these really, really fun and cool speed workouts. And I think too, from what we know, kind of as you age and especially as women age, it is important to keep the speed stuff there. You're really good at going kind of long and slow forever, and people in your age group tend to be. So it's like you really, really have to push that more speed stuff. And something else I think that we've built in a lot of is some good strength, really, really high quality strength, and really high quality hills as well. So do you want to talk a little bit just about how that has felt, or maybe how that has changed for you over time from being a runner earlier in life?
Sure. I definitely prioritize strength training more now than I ever have in my life. I think it was a nice to have before. And still, when given the choice, if I can go outside for a run for an hour, I would probably pick that over going into the gym. But the gains I've seen, both physically and emotionally, in terms of how I feel being able to lift heavy weight and how it's helping my training. I lift full body twice a week. I know a lot of the fitness folks that I follow would suggest that for women my age, you should split it up and do more 4 days a week and do it for 30 minutes. But the 2 days a week for like an hour works better for me. And it seems to be working okay. And then on the hill side, yeah, that was another thing where I feel like we got into those a little bit earlier in my time with Katie. I love hills. They're fun. But I was scared of them at first. And then you do it. You're like, oh, that's not so bad. That's kind of fun. And you get to walk down the hill. So
Katie, I'm kind of curious here to ask you as a coach here, when you've worked with an athlete for such a long time who's as awesome as Gina, how are you chatting? How are you collaborating on how to change things or introduce new things and get a good read on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, Gina, you're someone who really knows your body super, super well. And so most of the time, you don't really need to ask me if it's like, hey, I'm not feeling it today. Should I skip my run? Should I not do it? I think you've really developed this good sense of I know how to listen to my body for the most part. I think where I've been able to maybe introduce some new stuff for you is more about like pushing the edge of what you think you're capable of, just because I think back to when, we started out, I believe you were training for a road race or maybe a sprint try, maybe both at the time. And that was when we discovered actually that you're an amazing trail runner because you were picking all these crazy hilly routes for all of your runs and crushing it. And I'm like, hold on a second. This is someone who should be on trails. And then we opened the door to doing a bunch of really, really cool trail stuff. So I think I love that with any athlete, kind of being able to look over time. How are they doing their workouts? What do they seem to be enjoying? What workouts do they tend to skip because they don't like them? And which ones are they just so jazzed about? And from there, we can maybe pick appropriate goals. And I'm excited to do swim run with you because similarly, like you're a great swimmer, you love the pool, you love running, and the bike has not always been your favorite, right? So it's like, why don't we do an event that's all about just taking the bike out of the triathlon and is an adventure and fun like that? So it's been such a privilege to get to kind of watch that over time. And I hope to be able to do that kind of with all athletes where we see the evolution, then we think about, hey, how can we best use your skills and leverage them towards workouts that fit appropriately as well as events that are going to fit well? Because at the end of the day, this is like a fun thing that we do as recreational athletes. So that's been really fun for me.
And just Elena, I have to tell you, I want you to hear, like, you've been so forthcoming and open about how you've adjusted your training to help you be at your healthiest self. I think I will say, as an athlete, I've loved hearing your journey and how open you've been with all of us about how you found your best place and that listening to yourself. And, this week, Katie knows we moved my mom into assisted living last weekend. Like, so my life stress score has probably been very high this week. And the last 2 days, I walked my dog one day. Yesterday, I didn't do anything. I was tired emotionally, physically. My mom's doing great, but it was a lot. And my stomach was off. And so I just said, you know what? It's okay. I can miss a workout. It was good. So thank you both for that.
Oh, I love to hear that. Yeah, I'm glad that it's helpful, but it's all a journey. We're all learning how to listen to our bodies and figure out what works and also recognize that things change over time. So maybe to flip it back, one more question to you, Gina, on how things change over time. What have you felt change for you, if anything, and how have you addressed that to still continue to enjoy these races, to enjoy training, etc.?
Yeah. So to take a page from be open and vulnerable about where you are. So I'm 52 years old. I'm in perimenopause. I started taking hormone, or it's called menopause hormone therapy now instead of replacement therapy. I started it about a year ago. when I noticed that my sleep was really taking a whack. And also, I just found that I didn't feel as much like myself. I felt like my moods were much more mercurial. And I'm not telling anyone else what to do, but just this has worked well for me. I take progesterone and I have the estrogen patch, and it has been great in just helping. I think I feel more like myself. I don't know how to say it other than that. And, Katie and I have talked about this. It feels really good to still feel good in my body. I think that you can still feel really good in your body as a woman in your 50s. There are also women who have had much harder issues with the transition, and maybe mine are still to come. Who knows? But I think I prioritize my sleep. I have my Whoop on. I pay attention to it. I've learned that it's best to only have, one glass of wine is better than more than that. I used to have maybe one or two. Now I really try to just have one, and I try not to have it more than, 3 or 4 days a week. What else? I use magnesium at night to help with sleep, and theanine. I take vitamins B, C, and D every day in the morning, and I find those help me feel my best. I've gone in and out and need to go back in on fish oil. And I was taking creatine. I ran out. I need to get some more. I'll probably get back. I do think it helps a bit with recovery. So that's my routine.
That's awesome. No, that's so helpful. And thank you for sharing, because I think at the end of the day, like, we want as much information out there as possible. A lot of these topics aren't totally addressed. And I think one way to kind of deal with challenges of aging is just to be empowered by knowledge. Like, don't put your blinders on, learn everything you can, and then figure out if, hormone therapy or different supplements or whatever that is correct for you. But you need to know what the suite of options is. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, because I think it's really, really helpful insight. I think with an eye to time, this has been so helpful. We could have you on probably 8 more times and wouldn't even exhaust all the topics that we want to talk about. But I think let's jump into our challenge of the week and our gear pick of the week. Gina, do you want to just restate your amazing challenge from before so people have it in terms of setting goals?
Sure. So start your day with intention. Write down the 3 things that you want to accomplish that day to get you closer to your important goals, and then say them out loud.
I love it. That is such a good challenge. I'm going to start doing that. Elena, why don't you take it next with your challenge of the week?
Amazing. Okay, so mine is kind of a recap from a previous one, but it's officially now my challenge of the day. It was not my challenge of the day before, is to leave your phone outside your bedroom if you can. Ideally, you have an alarm clock that can help you with the alarm setting, which is the only reason I had my phone in my bedroom before. But it is such a mental relief. And then I go out in the morning and I don't even feel like the need to look at my phone right away. It's just made a big difference in terms of my just mental calm in my bedroom. So that's my challenge of the week.
That's fantastic. I'm going to start doing that too. I will close this one out. Start your day with a glass of water, ideally with some electrolytes. I have this really bad habit of just starting with coffee only, and sometimes I just don't even notice. And it's been like an hour and a half or 2 hours in the morning. I get caught up with work, whatever it is, and then I'm behind on hydration throughout the day. So if you can start with that water as you're making your coffee or whatever that is, I think you're going to be better hydrated, especially as the weather is finally getting just a little bit warmer.
Love that. I also need to take that over.
I'm doing both of those.
Okay, should we transition to gear pick of the week? Gina, I know you had one last year. Do you have an updated gear pick of the week for us?
Yes. So I know we're coming out of winter, but there is a winter piece of gear that is I think it's like, if it's on sale, buy it now. It's the Patagonia R1 Air pullover, either the half zip or the one with the zip. It is the best piece of equipment. I probably said this one last time. It is still the best, hands down. It is a great running top, skiing top, everyday top. I love it. And then also, in case I already said that one, the second one is I really love the energy bras from Lululemon. I have 2 versions. I have the high impact and the regular. And for the girls that need more support for their girls, great bra.
Amazing. Those are both incredible recommendations. And you were wearing that R-Wine just the other day when I saw you. And I was like, it's an amazing color. It's great. So that's on my list. Elena, take it away. Gear pick of the week.
Mine is kind of I guess a different form factor of maybe one gear pick that I've had plenty of times before, which is the Precision Fuel gels. I really love the Precision Fuel gels because they just work for me. They don't taste like much of anything. They go down really easy. And they have a form factor now that's a 90 gram, and it comes in like a little I don't know, larger pouch with a little twist off top. And I love it for a few reasons. One, it's a little bit more cost effective just because the packaging is, it's one sleeve of 3 times the gels of just the 30. So that's great. And then two, because it's resealable with a little twist off, I actually find it to be the cleanest gel wrapper. And I don't take it all at once. Typically, I take it like maybe I still make it into thirds, or maybe I've even on some intervals, I'm doing it every 10 minutes after every interval and having a little bit at a time. And it reseals nicely so it doesn't just spill the gel everywhere. Because if anyone is gelling a lot, that stuff gets everywhere and it's so sticky and it's on your hands and it's like staining my clothes. Or I was telling Katie before that I did a race, a ski mountaineering race, and I was wearing my avalanche beacon and I took a lot of gels, and somehow the gel stuff got onto my avalanche beacon, and it's like basically made it so it's very, very hard to move between search and send mode, which is kind of dangerous in the backcountry because it's just, you need to do that pretty quickly. So I have found too many troubles from gel residue, and I really like just the easy seal on these. So would recommend the 90 grams if you're up for it.
That's awesome. I love it. I'm definitely going to check that out because I love those Precision 30s, and I don't love that they get all over me and everything that I own. They also have gone all over my Hoka Rocket X2, which is my geek fake of the week, my carbon speed shoes. I do have an interesting anecdote about sizing for these shoes, though. So I had a pair, loved them. They were great. I was pretty much at like probably 250 miles on these speed shoes, and I was like, all right, it's time for a new pair. I ordered the new pair in what I think is my regular size, and I put them on, and I was like, these are way too small. They're totally like pinching my toes. I have no idea what's going on. And then I go to the original shoes that I've been wearing for 250 miles and realize that they are a full size larger than I actually thought. I don't know if they were mislabeled in the box or what was going on, but usually wear a women's 8. I'd been wearing a women's 9 in these shoes for 250 miles. So all this is to say that you should probably size up a little bit on the Hoka Rocket X2. Ultimately, I settled for the 8.5 in the second pair that I got, which do work pretty well. But yeah, I was shocked to know that I had run 250 miles in shoes that were probably a size too big technically, but size up. They are really, really great shoes. They're super fun, super bouncy, and I'm definitely team speed shoes.
I need to get a pair. I wear Brooks Hyperion Max too, and I love them. And I wear a full size bigger than my street size instead of a half, which is my usual. Maybe all those like bouncing shoes are tighter.
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. What? Okay, Katie, a quick question on the Hokas too. Are these like the Hoka equivalent of like the Alpha Flies? Like, are these like road marathon race shoes?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah, they're carbon. They're quite similar to the Hoka Mach 6. If anyone wears those, those are my regular shoe. They're like my regular trainers. This just has the carbon plate in there. I don't know if they are as like, they're definitely not as garish looking as the Alpha Flies. Like they look kind of like a normal shoe, but they're very fast and very springy.
Cool. Okay, I gotta check these out. I haven't bought any super shoes in a while. My super shoes are from like 2020, and the technology's changed massively. So I'm kind of excited to see how it would feel.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, folks, thank you so much for listening. Gina, thank you so much for being here. This was so much fun. We love having you on the podcast and always appreciate that you're such a great listener, as well as such a great athlete to coach and such a great role model for us. So thank you for being here. And yeah, we will catch folks next time. We've got a fun and exciting episode on deck. So we will see you then. And thanks so much for listening.